Her body was too big to reproduce, so they cast her out, but only one human. Made her a mother. They always laughed when she entered the square, not just the children, though their laughter was the sharpest. It was the adults, two older women with narrow shoulders and finely sculpted jaws, their delicate voices laced with venom disguised as amusement, too tall to carry anything but shame. One murmured, "She must have been meant for another planet," said another one with no ceilings they didn't even try to hide their snickers anymore. After all, she wasn't one of them, not really, just a visitor, a genetic error. 8 feet 2 inches. Juno knew every inch of it, knew how her head skimmed the glowing archways of Valia's central pavilion, knew how her hips barely fit between the public transport rows, knew how her hands, her long-fingered, calloused, unpretty hands, curled protectively around her pack, not because she was afraid but because the stairs made her feel like a zoo exhibit. "Look," a child whispered, tugging at its mother's sleeve, "is she broken?" The woman didn't answer, she just smiled. Pitying and cold. "She's human," she said gently, "they don't build them right." Juno kept walking. Her boots echoed too loudly on the bio stone, even the ground seemed to betray her, unable to carry her weight without broadcasting it. The thud 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 of her steps felt like a punishment. She ducked beneath the lattice arch again, the same one she'd hit her forehead on her first week here. The scar had healed, but she still flinched at the memory. Someone laughed. "They should have brought a shorter model," came a voice from the seated group near the herb vendor. "I heard humans came in normal sizes too." "She's not unwell," another voice said in the same breathless tone people used when trying not to sound cruel and failing, just unbearable. And there it was again, that word, unbearable. They didn't mean romantically, not here, not on Vala. They meant biologically. She couldn't carry. She was, by all official measurements, an empty shell. Juno's reproductive lattice didn't respond to the pairing protocol used by the Velaran match matrices. It was the first thing they scanned upon her arrival, before they even showed her where the bathing quarters were. No sync activity, no fertility resonance, no capacity for neural maternal bonding. "She has no frequency," the tech had said, blinking at the results. "No harmonic window," another corrected. "In short, her womb did not sing on Velhia. That was everything. It meant her strength, her intelligence, her skills, none of it mattered. Her towering frame, so revered on Earth's athletic circuits, was now a punchline, a malfunction, a burden they were forced to accommodate but never embrace. And still she walked the glittering streets of the alien city every day, enduring the whispers, pretending she didn't hear the wordless apologies in the translator drone's softened tones. Subject: Juno of Earth. Human, female, class Unlin. She hated that title most of all. Unlin, not individual, not diplomatic envoy, just a body they had no use for. She paused on the bridge overlooking the lower terraces. The sun was falling, twin moons casting a pale violet glow across the glowing flora that shimmered along the water's edge. From here the world looked quiet, beautiful even, but the silence only deepened the ache in her chest. Back home, she'd been a captain, a team leader, a woman with command in her voice and weight in her step. Here she was an anomaly to be tolerated, a walking reminder that humans were too crude to fit into something as elegant as Ryan. Biolture. A gust of wind caught the edge of her jacket. She pulled it tighter, though the temperature didn't warrant it. Her reflection shimmered in the water below, too tall, too wide, all harsh lines and heavy limbs. She tried to imagine herself as they saw her, oversized, ungraceful, biologically irrelevant. The grief was quiet, not sharp, not anymore, just a constant background hum, like tinnitus of the soul. That evening she took the long path back to her quarters, past the cliffside gardens, through the edge of the unlit grove where few citizens wandered at night. She liked the silence there, it didn't judge her. She reached the overlook, sat heavily on the stone edge and let her legs dangle into the dark. Her back hurt, her ankles throbbed. The pack she carried dug into her shoulder blades. She hadn't eaten since morning. She rarely remembered to anymore, but the hunger had dulled into something more manageable than attention. Above her the stars flickered, different constellations than Earth, alien patterns, unfamiliar stories. She wondered if any of them spoke of women like her, too large, too strong, too visible to be loved. Then movement. She turned her head down the path, half silhouetted by the glow of a grounded terracer stood a man, human, shorter than her, maybe 5 feet 11 inches by the looks of it. Quiet posture, hands tucked into the folds of a field coat. His hair was dark, windswept, and his eyes, when they met hers, didn't flicker with curiosity or discomfort, just quiet recognition. He didn't approach, he didn't wave, but he didn't look away either. Later she would remember that moment, the silence, the way the stars blinked and witnessed the look on his face that said, "I see you," without saying anything at all. But at that moment all she could do was lower her eyes, not out of shame but surprise. She wasn't used to being seen without being measured. The man stayed a few seconds longer, then turned and walked away. She Stayed on the ledge long after, her hand resting over her chest as if trying to memorize what it had felt like when someone didn't flinch from her shadow. She didn't know his name, not yet, but something in her had shifted, not healed, not softened, but cracked and cracks as she'd learned where light got in. Juno didn't sleep that night. She lay still on the narrow cot in her assigned dwelling, Spartan square and sterile. The walls hummed faintly from the power core below. A single vine from the exterior architecture had crept in through the ceiling vent, pulsing with soft blue light like a heartbeat she didn't recognize. She watched it for hours. Sleep wouldn't come, not after the way he'd looked at her, not stared, not assessed, not ogled, just looked. She couldn't remember the last time someone had seen her and not immediately calculated her size, her potential, her threat. That man, Rowan, if she remembered correctly, had watched her like he was reading a language he only half understood, but desperately wanted to. That shouldn't have mattered, not here, not on this planet where her usefulness was a daily negotiation and her worth was a diplomatic fiction. And yet it stuck. The stillness in his posture, the absence of pity, the way he hadn't looked away, it burrowed under her ribs like a slow burn. The next morning her limbs felt heavier than usual. She rolled her shoulder until it cracked, reached for the hydration unit and swallowed 2 gulps of filtered mineral water, skipped breakfast again. She wasn't hungry and pulled on her uniform. Another day of silent relevance. She made her way toward the lower quadrant where mineral scanners had malfunctioned overnight. Standard maintenance run, hands-on, dirty, her kind of work. The corridors were less crowded this early, fewer eyes, fewer whispers. The stone tiles underfoot were slick with dew condensation. Her boots squeaked once and she winced. Every sound she made always seemed louder than it should have been. The entrance to the mineral sector was lined with curved obsidian spires, elegant like everything on, but unkind in how they forced her to stoop to enter. She duck-stepped through and found herself unexpectedly not alone. Rowan was already there. He knelt by the scanner core, elbow deep in the opened housing unit, tools scattered in orderly precision beside him. He didn't look up when she entered. Juno hesitated. She could leave, she could turn around, request reassignment, pretend this was a misfile. Instead she cleared her throat. Rowan glanced up, eyes blinking in the soft light. No surprise, no awkward fumble. Just that same calm, steady gaze. Didn't expect help, he said simply. I didn't know you'd be here, she replied. Silence settled between them, not sharp, not cold. Just waiting. Rowan sat back on his heels, wiping his hands on a rag. Scanners cycling wrong, BOF feedback loops overloaded, probably a thermal bridge collapse. She nodded. Can I assist you? Know your way around wiring? I know how to keep my fingers from frying, she said most days. A flicker of a smile, barely there. He shifted to make room. She dropped to her knees beside him, the stone digging into her legs, but she didn't complain. Her hands moved to the auxiliary panel, fingers scanning for heat signatures, feeling for vibration patterns. The work grounded her, mechanical, predictable. Nothing laughed at her here. They worked in tandem, no need to explain every move, no interruption, just tools passed back and forth. The occasional nod, time thinned. The silence grew companionable. At one point their hands brushed, both reaching for the same cable clamp. She froze. So did he, but neither pulled away. Her eyes lifted. His had already found hers. It was barely a moment, a breath caught between them, but something shifted. It wasn't hunger, not yet. It wasn't even longing. It was recognition, the kind that comes not from sight but from quiet survival. The scanner hissed back to life. Lights flickered green. The hum stabilized. They stood. She towered over him, a full head and shoulders taller. The difference should have made things awkward, but he didn't shrink, didn't joke, just looked up at her like it was normal, like she was normal. Juno shifted the tool belt on her hip. Thanks, he said, voice low. I could say the same. You usually work alone. I don't usually get assigned with humans. He tilted his head slightly. They think you can't pair. They think a lot of things. I don't, he said, and then added with deliberate softness, I watch. She held his gaze. Why, she asked. Because you move like someone who's forgotten how to be seen. She swallowed hard. The room felt smaller. He stepped back, not away, just giving her space, noticing, respecting. I'll log the repair, he said. She nodded. He turned, pausing briefly before he left. You're not unparable, Juno, he said. You just don't fit in the cages they built. Then he was gone. She stood alone in the humming silence, one hand resting on the warm scanner housing, her heart pounding louder than any machinery. No one had ever said that to her, not without a sneer, not without pity. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, she remembered what hope felt like. It was a strange, vulnerable thing, but she didn't look away from it, not this time. The next few days passed in silence, but not the kind that hurt. Juno resumed her work without fanfare. Assignments came and went. Drones buzzed through corridors. The city pulsed with its usual quiet elegance. She ate when she remembered, drank when her vision blurred, and stretched her legs on the long walks between sectors. But Something had changed. She found herself listening for footsteps that matched Rowan's gait. She noticed the way certain doors opened just a little slower when he walked in behind her. She noticed that for the first time in weeks she wasn't avoiding eye contact. He never sought her out, never forced conversation, but he was there, always quietly, always steady, always noticing. On the fourth day she received a temporary reassignment to the outer agricultural terraces, not a punishment, just a task no one else wanted. Too far, too exposed, too primitive. She accepted without comment. By mid-morning she was hiking alone down the moss-slicked ridge that led to the lower basin, pack strapped tight to her back, the weight of tools pressing down across her shoulders. The air changed here, less refined, less filtered. The scent of soil replaced the sterile ozone tang of the upper city. The horizon opened wide and unsymmetrical, stretching into fields of bioluminescent stalks swaying under distant sunbeams. She liked it. It felt unprocessed, uncurated. When she reached the main cultivation hub, a small tented structure tucked beneath a jutting cliff, she was surprised to see someone already there, head bent over a failing irrigation console. Rowan, of course. He looked up as she approached, didn't smile, just nodded once. Systems jammed, he said. Filter mesh collapsed. She set her pack down beside him without a word. They worked for hours, no translator drones, no sterile command tones, just fingers in wet soil, knees in the mud, breath sinking through exertion. Her sleeves were rolled high, biceps marked with dirt and sweat. Rowan's face was strewn with grime, hair pushed back by a band he'd cut from the hem of his shirt. Juno liked how human he looked, like that unfinished knot, perfectly pressed knot. Shrink wrapped for approval. He looked like someone who'd learned to endure midway through the repair. The skies opened, rain fell fast, not hard, warm and constant, soaking them in seconds. They didn't rush, didn't complain. The crops needed the water anyway. She stood back, arching as she stretched out her spine, water cascading down the curve of her neck. Her uniform clung to her body, and for the first time in a long while she didn't think about how she must look. Rowan stood beside her, chest rising slowly with the rain. He didn't speak, just turned his head and looked at her like a question answered. "You don't flinch," she said softly, not turning. "No reason to. Most men do, or stare. I don't need to measure you to see you." She exhaled slow and tight. "I used to be seen for what I could lift, what I could break, then what I couldn't carry. You've carried yourself," he said. "That counts." They said nothing more. Later, after the rain had stopped and their work was done, they sat on the edge of the cliffs overlooking the glowing plains. The clouds split apart in the distance, letting shafts of violet sunlight dance across the valley. The light caught on her wet hair. Rowan handed her a protein bar from his rations. She took it, biting off a piece too fast, choked, coughed once. He said nothing, just passed her his water tube. "Thanks," she muttered, cheeks flushing. "You eat like someone who forgets she's allowed to need things." She blinked. The words hit harder than they should have. "Doesn't everyone numbersome just forget how to ask?" She looked down at her hands. Strong, calloused, dirt under every nail. "What did you leave behind?" she asked. Voice low. Rowan didn't answer right away. His fingers curled around the rim of the rock, knuckles pale. "A family that talked over me," he said at last. "Rooms I never quite filled. I was the smallest, quietest, easiest to forget. That's why I came here. I thought maybe in a world this far from home I could matter." In silence she turned to face him fully. "I was always too loud," she said. "Even when I didn't speak, my body did the talking for me. I tried to fold, tried to vanish, but you can't hide an 8 feet 2 inches in shadow." He studied her, not her size, not her shape. "Her, you don't need to shrink. I don't know how to stop trying. Let me remind you, the words weren't romantic, they weren't flirtatious, they were something more dangerous." True. That night as they parted at the edge of the ridge, he didn't touch her, but his hand brushed her arm just once, fingers glancing across the curve of her elbow. She didn't flinch, not this time. When she returned to her quarters, soaked to the skin raw from work, she didn't wipe the mud from her face right away. She looked in the mirror and saw something unfamiliar. Not someone small, not someone broken, someone still. Here's someone beginning to feel real again. The wind smelled like stone dust and wet copper. Juno stood at the edge of the lower terraces, the slope beneath her feet soft from the morning rains. The clouds were thin today, filtered sunlight spilling across the mist-veiled valley and long silver sheets. The light painted her skin like metal. She didn't move. Behind her, footsteps crunched over the gravel, light ones, familiar. Rowan, he didn't speak as he approached. She didn't turn to greet him. They didn't need to anymore. He stopped to pace behind her. Waited. "I didn't expect to be reassigned here again," she said. "Neither did I," he replied. She smiled faintly. "You think they're watching? They always are, but maybe they're not sure what they're looking at." She turned to face him, then slowly her body cast a long shadow over his. The difference in height undeniable, but Rowan never bristled beneath it, never made it feel like a joke or a Novelty, do I intimidate you? She asked. Eyes steady. No, he said without pause. But I think you scare the people who built this place to feel safe in sameness. She inhaled sharply, not because it hurt but because it didn't. They moved to the slope's edge where the soil was warm, sitting side by side on an outcropping of root-covered stone. Below them iridescent crops shimmered in slow waves, breathing with the rhythm of the wind. Juno stretched her legs out, boots caked in drying mud. She rolled up her sleeves. The sun kissed her forearms, pale scars catching the light, some faded, some recent. Most came from before Rowan offered her half of a nutrient bar. She took it. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that only exists between people who have decided not to fill space with noise. Then he said without looking at her, "Why did you come here?" She didn't answer immediately. "My file said, cultural bridge specialist. My real job was to make the others comfortable with me being around," she said, "to prove that someone like me, big, blunt, visibly human, could be non-threatening. And did you succeed?" "No." Her voice was dry, but I played the part. Smiled when they asked about Earth's gravity, let them run their diagnostics, laughed when they made jokes about mating compatibility, like I wasn't in the room. Rowan's jaw tensed. They thought I couldn't hear the drones whispering non-viable strain. She added, like I was deaf along with being useless. He turned to her. "You're not useless." She met his gaze. "You don't even know what I am." "I know you're still here. That counts for something." She stared at him hard, long, like she was trying to decide if he meant it. He didn't look away. "Back on Earth," she said after a beat, "I was something, captain of my school's gravity ball team, top of the class. They called me the Atlas Girl. Said I carried our wins on my shoulders." He raised an eyebrow. "They meant it as a compliment," she continued, "until they ran my bio scan and found out I couldn't carry anything else." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "I'd never wanted kids until they told me I couldn't have them. Then it was all I could think about, what my body couldn't do, what it failed to be." Rowan didn't try to comfort her. He didn't say it wasn't true or that it didn't matter. He simply said, "I'm sorry." It was enough. She leaned back on her elbows, letting the sun warm her face. "What about you?" she asked after a while. "What brought you here?" He hesitated, not out of shame but because his answer was fragile. "I was tired of being small," he said. That surprised her. She turned to him, puzzled. "I don't mean in height," he added, "though I've always been the smallest in the room." He flexed one hand slowly, like remembering something. "I come from a family of men who measured themselves in deck volume. Violence I didn't fit." She said nothing, watching his profile. "They told me I was too soft, that I'd get crushed out here, and maybe I would have if I hadn't learned that softness doesn't mean weak, just unarmored." He looked at her then. "And sometimes the things without armor are the ones that survive longest because they know how to bend." Juno felt her throat tighten. He added more quietly, "I didn't come here to be someone. I came here to stop being invisible." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And now I see you," he said. "That's a start." They sat in silence again, but this time it was different. Not avoidance, not distance, just two people letting memory breathe. The wind moved through the trees above them. A violet-winged insect hovered, then drifted off. The sun fell a little lower and the sky blushed faintly toward dusk. Juno shifted her shoulder, brushed against his. She didn't move away. He didn't either. Later, when they returned to their temporary base camp, their hands brushed again as they passed through the curtain of vines covering the entrance. This time he didn't pull away, and she didn't let go. The past hadn't vanished, but now it had company. Someone else to carry it with. Night settled over the base camp like a soft exhale. The wind had quieted. Even the insects had fallen still. A hush wrapped itself around the outer ridges, not empty, but full of the things not yet said. Inside the tent the lanterns were low, casting warm amber shadows across the walls. The scent of burnt resin and wet stone lingered in the canvas. Juno sat with her knees drawn loosely to her chest, back resting against one of the structural poles. Her hands were dirty. She hadn't bothered to clean them. She didn't care. Across from her, Rowan sat cross-legged, sleeves rolled, his shirt stained with soil and rain. He was watching her, not intrusively, not like someone with an agenda, just seeing her, letting his eyes rest where they wanted to, and she let him. She didn't shrink this time, didn't shift to make herself smaller, quieter, easier. For once she wanted to be fully visible, even if it scared her. "You're quiet," she said. "So are you," he answered. They didn't smile. They didn't have to. Later she moved to her bedroll, not saying a word. She sat, unlaced her boots, peeled off her damp outer shirt. The air clung to her skin like breath. Her undershirt was damp with sweat and dried salt. It smelled like her, real and human. She didn't look over when he crossed the tent and knelt beside her, but she felt him not touching, not yet, just there. Juno turned her head. Rowan's gaze rose slowly from her arms to her throat to her eyes. He didn't reach, he didn't rush. Instead he said quietly, "Do You want this? Her breath caught. No one had ever asked her like that, not even when they should have. She nodded. Once, then again slower. I don't know how to be gentle, she whispered, not with my body. I do, he said the first time. Their lips met. It wasn't seamless. Her mouth was broader than his, her hands larger when she cupped his face. Her fingers wrapped easily around the back of his neck, thumb resting just below his jawline. His hands came to her hips, not possessive, anchoring, assuring. Juno pulled back, breathing hard. Tell me if it's too much. It's not, he murmured. I'm still here. She shifted her legs, folding to either side of him as she slowly settled in his lap. The weight of her was real, undeniable. Her thighs bracketed his with ease, her back curved over his smaller frame, yet he didn't flinch beneath her. He held firm, held her. Is this okay? She asked, voice low, uncertain. He looked up at her from where he sat between her legs, his face level with her collarbone. You feel like gravity, he said. I want you to fall. They moved slowly. There was no choreography, no practiced rhythm, just two bodies learning the shape of one another. Juno's hands found the hem of his shirt, lifting it over his head. She touched his chest, fingers dragging across the trail of old scars and softness there. He reached for the hem of hers but stopped, looked at her. She nodded. The cloth peeled away. Her torso, long, powerful, thick with muscle, was marked by time, not grooming. Her body was a history, and for the first time it didn't feel like something she had to defend. Rowan pressed a kiss just beneath her rib cage. She exhaled sharply, hand instinctively flying to his shoulder. Sorry, he said, voice low. Number, it's just no one's ever touched me there, she murmured. I can stop, don't they? Lay down together. Her body stretched along his, enveloping him. He was cradled between her thighs now, looking up at her, breath already shallow. She moved carefully, learning the mechanics of her own strength in relation to his frame. Her hips rolled forward, testing. He grunted softly, head tilting back, hands gripping her sides. You okay? She asked. More than okay, he breathed. She lowered herself further, and they connected fully. The feeling took her breath away, not just the sensation though that was fierce, overwhelming, unexpected in its pleasure, but the fit. It didn't make sense there. Sizes shouldn't align, the angles shouldn't work, but they did. Her body, for all its scale and breadth, fit him like it had waited for this. She rocked her hips, slow and uncertain, watching his face. He gasped. His hands rose to cup her face, trembling slightly. God, Juno, he